afternoon, everybody. Actually, I think I am supposed to go first. I knew that. Hey, everyone, welcome to At the Table with Tom and Eric, a show about people who play games with a very tightly written script. I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer. Our guest at the table today has been in the industry since 2014, working with Gamma, Yellow, Renegade Game Studios, Pandasaurus Games, and just recently became the North American Marketing Manager for Hachette Board Games. That's quite the mouthful. Please welcome Danni Loe. Hello, Danni.
Hello. How's it going?
Going all right. Very excited.
Super glad to have you here. Last year. Was it last year? It was last year. It seems like several years ago at Gen Con, Danni was dragging me from table to table to play various games at the booth.
Yeah, that was last year.
That was only September, too. It wasn't that long.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of time going by, folks, Dice Tower Cruise registration is live as we speak. Go to dicetowercruise.com and you can sign up and come. Unless it's sold out, of course. I don't think it is yet. But don't miss out on the best board game convention on the seas. I guess we can say that. We're a really good board game convention on the seas.
Indeed.
That's all my announcements.
And then we're
Eric.
just
It's
a little bit
now.
away. Awesome. Well, this is the time that we get to focus on our guest and find out a little bit more about your history, Danni, your journey into the hobby. We should lay down some groundwork. I know you are currently living in Texas, but you didn't grow up there. So take us through the journey. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get from there to where you live now?
You're right. I am a Texas transplant. I've not yet incorporated y'all into my vocabulary.
Are you overly proud of your state to the point of irritation to everyone else?
No, because I've lived in too many states. I have no pride one over the other. I grew up in SoCal, 2 hours south of Los Angeles and 2 hours north of Mexico. So,
okay, so like San Diego area.
Palm Springs.
Okay.
Palm Springs, yeah. San Diego, LA, Palm Springs make this little triangle. So,
okay,
one of the points. But I have lived in San Diego when I worked for Renegade.
Excellent.
I've also lived in Ohio and France and now Texas. So.
Wow. So how long were you in France?
10 months. One school year.
Oh, so like part of your study? Because I know you studied French language in school, so that was part of your study process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a year abroad in college.
All right.
There's a lot of board gamers right now who are very jealous because of all the games that come out in French. I'm still fascinated. 20 years ago, before Eric was born, when the hobby was just becoming more prevalent in America, there were people going out of their way to learn German and sometimes French just so they could play all these games. I was always fascinated by people's ability to do that or willingness to learn another language just to play a board game.
Yeah. I mean, I know like 3 words in German for this reason. Whenever I go to Essen, I want to be able to speak to all the publishers.
And 3 words will get you there? That's impressive.
How much
as well.
Game?
There you go.
So how did you first enter the hobby? Like, what was the moment that you said, this is what I want to do for a long time? Was there a particular game that really drew you in, a particular memory that you can point out?
Oh, this is a big question. So I guess it started when I was in college, and a friend brought over a board game, and it happened to be Small World Underground. Not
That's
the original
a nice.
version.
Okay. Okay.
And I remember playing it 2-player on my little coffee table in my studio apartment, and then becoming hooked. And that opened my eyes to modern board games, not just Uno and Monopoly and the classics, but everything else that we know today. So in college, we started a game night, a regular game night. People would come and go, like just this like ragtag group of people playing games, and we'd bring kind of like a board game potluck. We'd each bring a game we wanted to play. So
okay.
Each week was a different selection, different genres, everything. And eventually I started working at the downtown board game store in college. And when I finished college, that led to Yellow as customer service.
I'm really fascinated by Small World Underground being your gateway game. I don't think I've met anyone that's happened before. I mean, Small World, I guess, happened for several people. That's really intriguing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, after that, it was your standard King of Tokyo, Munchkin, those games. Never Catan. I've still never played Catan, but yeah, I love Small World Underground as my first gaming experience.
How many people were in that board game potluck group in college?
I think there were a standard 10 of us that would come regularly. Not all at the same time, not always, but yeah, 10 regulars.
Was there one guy who always brought Twilight Imperium and it never got played?
Not Imperium, but Struggle. There was one person who loved Twilight Struggle.
That's just interesting because the potluck, I like the potluck idea, but what do you do when that one person keeps bringing that one game that no one else really wants to play, and they kind of look sad when no one wants to play it? Do you end up feeling, do you humor those people, or do you just ignore them and play another game?
I think most of the time we humored them. They got like one try, a one round sample, and if the majority of people were not feeling the game, were not excited about it, we would put it back in the box, move on.
Ooh, that is a tough crowd.
One chance.
Short. We got a lot of games to play.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people I know who they'll be hating a game, and I'm like, we can quit if you want. They're like, I don't want to offend you. Like, not offended. I'd rather play a fun game with you than have you sit there and be miserable through a game that you're not enjoying. No, unless your name's Eric, in which case be miserable.
Wow.
Well, not you.
I'm envious of this group. This is not something that I had in college. It was, we maybe played Risk in the lounge one day, but we never had that sort of group that was pulling out games all the time. So that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So going back to, we mentioned your education a little bit earlier on. You studied French language and education. Was that a dual major?
Education was my minor because my career plan was to become a high school French teacher, which clearly I took a turn somewhere.
Okay, well, where does that turn come? Because did you start work? You worked for the board game store, mm-hmm. But when did you start dabbling in publisher assistance and that sort of thing?
So my last quarter of college, I needed a second job because summer had ended. I worked at the zoo, and that was not their busy season. The fall was not their busy season. So I was looking for a second job, and we basically had a university Craigslist. So I get on, Google my options, and there was board game customer service. Now, I thought it was just for another game store in town. But I get an interview. I show up. Lo and behold, it's with the Yellow rep who'd come into my store a couple years ago trying to sell me Mythic Battles. Was that a game?
Yes, it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yes, it was one they were trying to sell.
So it ended up being Yellow, the publisher, not customer service for a game store, but for an actual publisher. But I was upfront. I was like, this is just a part-time position. I'm going to go to grad school in June. So you've got me for just a few months. That was the plan. But it turns out there was not really high demand for French language teachers. So the grad school program didn't run. So I was like, okay, well, you got me for another year. And then the next year, it didn't run either. So I was like, well, I guess I just work here forever now. And that turned into me learning along those couple years, taking on more responsibilities, from translation to website to sales to eventually everything. And then when I had a little bit of everything under my belt, I started, I went to Renegade and I started all these other marketing specific positions.
Let me ask you this:
when you get yeah, go for it.
When you get a new rule book or a new game and you're learning it and has multiple languages, do you default to English? And if not, if let's say the game is from France originally, do you jump to the French rule book? Which rule book do you read?
So I will read the English, but if something is fishy or I don't quite agree, like if a rule doesn't make sense, I'll reference the French one to make sure the translation isn't the problem. This happens often when there's a rules dispute at the table with a big group of people too. They're like, Danny, find another source. Fact check.
And then no one can argue with you about that. You're like, this is what it says. And I would have to say, I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. Another reason to learn German too. Make my arguments ironclad.
In 4 languages, yes.
Have you ever used the multilingual rule books to brush up on that second or third language? Like you now know the rules to King of Tokyo in English, so now pull out the French rule book just to brush up on some of the idioms and terms that you may have seen before?
I do that with French through translating. Like I have to read a lot of rule books that way and get paid to do it. I don't know enough of other languages to really identify the other expressions and stuff in the rule books, but it is a great idea.
So let's focus on the translation, because this is something I'm very interested to talk to you about. What was your first translation project? When was this always part of the job description, or did you say, you know what, I think I can do this, and decide to take on one of these projects?
It was one of my Jane of all trade evolutions at Yellow, because they're French. They're a French publisher, right? So I worked for the American branch, and it was sending emails, having meetings in French with that team all the time. And they're like, hey, Danny speaks French. We need this. It was Tempura, one of their little white box card games.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, Tempura with the cats.
Tempura.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was my first translation project. It was, low stakes. There was no pressure. It was just a little card game, so it was pretty easy to do. It wasn't like the next King of Tokyo, but it went well. And so I just kept doing it until I left Yellow. But now I translate for them again, and I also translate for Repos. Seven Wonders, Just One. Because a previous colleague at Yellow France now works for Repos, so she took me along with her. And it just became this organic thing that I do now.
When you translate the rule book for a game like Just One or other things, do you also go through the lists of words that are being translated over? Because there's like a bank of words for the game.
Yeah. Party games are a beast to translate, especially word games, because you have to translate the 200-something cards. So you just have a spreadsheet with 200, sometimes 400 rows of words, and you just fill in the next column. But you also have to be careful not to translate a synonym the same way, because then you'll have duplicate cards in the English version.
And sometimes a word is common in one language, but it's not really common in another language, or there isn't even an exact word, so it's a phrase rather than a word.
Correct. And you also have to worry about character count too, because in French there may be a single simple word that describes merry-go-round, but if I translate into merry-go-round and it's too long to fit on the card, I have to either find a very similar word or just throw it all out and have something new in its place. It's pretty challenging.
Yeah. Do you think it's easier as a native English speaker and having more knowledge in French and then being able to understand the English idioms, as opposed to maybe having French be your first language and having to understand English idioms from the other side?
Oh yeah, I'll occasionally get job offers from American publishers being like, oh, we need to put this into French. I'm like, well, I am not your person. You need to find a native French speaker for that, to be sure that the grammar is correct, because I'm not perfect. Two, that any of these idioms or colloquialisms are translated over correctly. And two, it's or 3, it's faster for a native speaker to type everything up.
I'm learning.
Tom's going to take on a translation project of his own.
Oh, he is not. Most people insist that Tom Vassell does not know English, so I believe we'll stop there.
So, Danny, what is the biggest challenge? Is it dealing with those party games and the word count there, or are there other like hidden dangers that come with taking on a translation project?
So that, yeah, you're right. Party games, one type of challenge. A different type of challenge is when a rule book has a bunch of flavor, which is fun. It's still fun. We all love it. But the flavor doesn't always translate easily. Like onomatopoeia. What is piff, paff, poof? Like what? That turns into bang, boom in English. Or rule books are technical documents most of the time, right? So it's very straightforward. Player plays the card in the middle of the table and does the thing on the card effect. But when you add flavor to it, you have to make sure it's fun, poetic, that it's not clunky, right? You can't just translate word by word. Or especially if they do hidden jokes, like references in there. I'm like, well, what the heck are you saying? What is this? So I have to Google. My Google search history is completely ruined after every one of these like fluffy games, because I'm learning all sorts of French culture. But yeah, it takes longer because I have to do all this research. Or I just ask the publisher. I'm like, I don't know what this is. And they're like, oh, it's the Smurf language. I'm like, oh, cool.
Oh, sure. Which I guess in American, the U.S. version of the Smurfs was just using the word Smurf for everything. But maybe the French version of Smurfs have more of a language?
Well, they're the Schtroumpf.
The Schtroumpfs?
Yeah.
Yes. See, I want to just ask you more about Smurfs now, but
I'm sorry, Eric. Our time is too short for that.
I guess we probably should move on. So it's time to move on to our larger discussion question. We could ask all sorts of questions of Danny but we should move on to our big discussion for the episode. And that, as a marketing professional, you are well suited to handle. We are always inundated year after year with so many game releases. We used to see the numbers at Essen in the hundreds of games that would just show up and just be boom, shotgun at everybody. And as a publisher or a marketer or a designer that has your baby that you are now sending out into the world, how do you stand out in this crowded marketplace and get noticed so that you have a chance of finding your audience?
That is the exact question I start every strategy meeting with. What makes us different? How do we differentiate ourselves from the 3,000 games released worldwide per year? I do think it's that high from a distributor report, 3,000.
That's way more than I thought.
Really? I thought that's pretty low, actually. I think there's more than that, but there's a lot.
It's overwhelming. There's so much chit-chat on social media, so many videos published, which you all know. So there's some things that are just luck-based, right? Things you can't anticipate, like, oh, one of your competitors is actually launching a zombie game at the same time you are. That stinks, right? And then it's whoever has better marketing or whoever has whatever random characteristic that players have latched onto for that year, because it changes all the time. But there are things that you can... Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned marketing. So obviously there's luck in games, and then there's also the kind of game that people want to play. But how much can marketing help? And I know this is a bit... I don't mean this question to be super self-serving here, because we are a marketing thing here at Dice Tower. But I often wonder, like, if you say, well, this game's not as good as... Game A is not as good as Game B, but we are going to push the snot out of Game A all year round and really push it. How much of a difference can that make?
I think it makes a ton of difference. That's how you get evergreens. You kind of have to will it into existence a little bit. If you have a great game, but you don't have any passion behind it or any effort, if you're not even talking about it, then you can't expect it to stand on its own, fly the nest. Even if it's like on paper, even if it's a stronger game. So by you talking about it, or you as in the publisher, by making it easy for other people to talk about, by sending review copies or making photos, social media graphics available, by sending the info to your external partners, distributors, game stores, your fans, it creates this momentum that keeps people talking about it.
I ask this because I noticed this, especially with your last position with Pandasaurus. Pandasaurus really, over the past several years, really started pushing their games with a calculated marketing plan. They obviously have some games that are much more popular than others. I mean, Machikoro, very, very popular, but they went out of their way to promote all their games at different various points. Did you find that any sort of thing was more effective than anything else?
I love review copies. And that's not just because I'm here on your channel. I spent my morning sending out dozens of review copies for Hachette. It's not something that they're previously doing, but I believe in the effectiveness of making it easy for people to talk about our games, and having influencers, press, content creators, whichever adjective, noun you want to use, by having them talk to their communities. It is a spidering network of excitement around a game. So I usually send around 40 to 60 copies of a game. Not all at the same time. I'll do waves. So before release, at release, after release, so that there's 3-4 months of continuous content. A review popping up over here, another review next week, and so on. And so it's all perception, right? If you see everyone talking about it, you're like, oh, well, I need to check out this game, even if it's just these couple dozen people.
You brought up an interesting point. A lot of what we lament in this, rapid fire release schedule is that you hear about a game, and then it's gone. Unless people they're talking about it all in a cluster like this, and then discussion has moved on to the next big thing. But trying to extend that curve seems to be the key to at least increasing your chances of getting something to take off, so that discussion continues for a longer period of time, and you don't have that immediate fall off as soon as it's not the latest release. Right.
And that's something that everyone struggles with, like the cult of the new, chasing the newest release. With the 3,000 games per year, the market right now lends itself to that. But I think it's important to show confidence in your games by supporting them even after they're no longer the hot new thing, right? They're still a great game, there's still value to them, and they're still relevant because they're only 2 months old. They're not old by any means.
Yeah.
But it's a different strategy. That's what I found that aligns with my goals. I've seen other publishers have an embargo where they have all of these dozen reviewers drop their content the same day, same time to make a huge splash. And that has a time and a place as well. But it doesn't lend itself to that long tail that we talked about.
Well, I got very lucky jumping into YouTube at the right time. YouTube is a pretty big method of advertising these days, but we're moving into the future. What do you see as what new ways of marketing are becoming effective? I need to know this for myself, but I mean, I'm just curious about it also.
Brush up your TikTok dances, Tom.
Yes. No, literally, that's what I was about to say. Maybe not the dances, but TikTok for sure. There are so many people on TikTok. And Tom, you and I can learn together because it takes me 3 hours to make a single TikTok. So.
Well, I guess my question is, I've been curious about that because I know for me, I'm definitely an old man when it comes. I watch a TikTok and I'm like, how can anyone like that? And my kids roll their eyes at me. But does a TikTok short, like, hey, look at this game, blah, blah, blah. Does that translate into a sale?
So, example, are you familiar with Corridor or Quarto, the
Yes.
Gigamic?
Oh, yeah, those are
abstract
classics.
game?
Yeah.
Yes, they are older than me by 1 or 2 years, but they are 30-year-old games. And the Corridor hashtag on TikTok has 150 million views. And we've seen that directly tied to sales. Like the day a new TikTok launches and goes viral, oh, there's a blip on our sales tracker. It's pretty amazing. And so like there's this untapped power of TikTok because it reaches so many new people, I think is its value. We're not just talking to our same fans over and over. So many people are on the app, and how the algorithm works, it shows people things that they've never been interested in. So it's constantly getting new eyes, new fans on your product.
This is a very, very side note here, but could you say the name of that company again? Because I wonder if I've been mispronouncing it, and I'm sure you know how to pronounce it. Is it Gigamic?
Gigamic or
Gigamic.
I've heard they don't care quite as much as other people might care about how correctly it's pronounced. Wasn't that the marketing at one point? However you pronounce it, it means fun or something like that.
Oh, I like that. That's very cute.
I think they used that at one point.
All right. Well, I'm trying not to
I want to
ruin it, but go ahead.
You were looking for an answer, weren't you?
I was.
So I want to touch very briefly on conventions, because I know that's also been a part of your purview, Danny, in figuring out the layout. I've seen you've been so good to share on Twitter some of your planning when it comes to getting ready for some of these big events. Same sort of deal where you have an exhibit hall full of people showing off their latest releases. How do you get noticed in that space? Is it a megaphone? Do you simply stand up on top of your booth and yell at people? Or are there good methods for getting noticed inside the hall?
Well, I think Tom standing on a table doing TikTok dances would certainly be noticed.
Please, I don't need this. I don't need this to become a thing.
Oh, it'll become a thing. It's already a thing.
Chat has already given you the moniker Tommy TikTok. So
great.
But that is a great question. It's also a very crowded area, right? With lots of noise, lots of visuals happening. It's kind of like social media in real life. So how to get noticed at conventions? There's a few different ways. One, by having your booth be attractive. And that could be the banners that you use, having the most exciting games featured on them, having your branding really noticeable. If you have this like strong fan base who knows who your company is and also your games, having it be an inviting space. So something that I'm carrying forward, like post-pandemic with the social distancing rules, is having adequate space between tables so that people, when they enter your booth, they can breathe. They don't have to go butt to butt with other people they don't know, but they can walk through, they can see the games, see the tables, and not have it be this anxiety-inducing experience. There are sponsorships, advertising you can do, depending on your budget. That's always the question, right? One often underutilized avenue, though, are events. Because most of the time they're free to run or free to submit. You just staff them, right? But it is an area that people are very interested in, right? Before we went live, we were talking about the live show at Gen Con, how many tickets have already sold. And I posted on social media this morning how many of the Hachette events have already sold out. And it's been open for 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
But there's a strategy here to submitting your events. You have the game name in your title, your company is tied to the event, and you use it as another way to promote your events. Like if people search your company name, they'll see which games you're supporting at the show. And that's before the convention happens. They can see what will be at your booth and get an idea of what they have on their wish list. This is a big answer. There's a lot more to talk about too, so stop.
It's not really a wrap-up question, is it? We could do a whole other show. And I know it's always tricky, and especially when you only have, if you have the smallest size booth and you've decided to leave the pipe and drape up, so you have just the blinders on, basically. It's hard to get noticed when it's just one of many things as people are walking by. So I guess it feels good to think outside the box, as it were, with events and trying to get noticed outside that peripheral vision.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Essen Spiel does that's really amazing, and I keep trying to make it happen over here with my booths, is having immersive experiences. If you walk around the halls of Spiel, in the biggest halls, there are booths that have thematic furniture.
Yes.
So you sit down to play the game and you are in the setting, everywhere around you, 3D. It's a 4D experience. You are in Katara or wherever. But that takes time and money and energy to plan, but it's something I want so bad.
I know some have tried to do that. Gen Con sometimes has some spectacle booths, but I know it requires a lot of jumping through hoops because those convention centers are less used to that sort of maneuvering. They want you to use their pipe and drape, their furniture, their all of this stuff. Whereas I think the Messe in Essen is more used to the construction and the production of these sorts of events.
Well, that's good info. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to some questions from our viewers and listeners. We put up a thread on Board Game Geek.
The hot spot.
The hot spot. We put up a thread on Board Game Geek asking for some questions for when you were on here. And if you folks watching live would like to ask anything, now's the time to put those questions into chat. But I want to start with this question from Walla Walla 547. Going back to your translation work, Danny. I'm curious about your process. Do you have a glossary of standard board game terms that you use over and over again for consistent translations between games?
That is an interesting question. There's the standard vocab that's present in every game, like card, board, pawn, token, that you just know, right? I've had to define what a pawn, like when to use pawn, when to use token. The answer is wood versus cardboard. But this type of thought process, there are also other situations, like an expansion to a base game or a new addition to an older game, like the new Seven Wonders. I had to ask Repos if they wanted me to copy, like use the same glossary as in the original Seven Wonders, or if they wanted me to start from scratch, don't even pay attention to it, don't look at it. And they wanted that latter. They're like, it's a full facelift, like we're a blank slate right now. Expansions, more often than not, they'll want you to reference exactly the rules used in the base game, so there's no confusion. But yeah, it really depends on the publisher. But generally, the vocab that's common between publishers is just your basic components.
What's the most difficult game term to translate that you've run into? That seems easy in one language, but doesn't make sense where you're headed.
I struggle all the time with sheets, like a player sheet or a reference sheet. They call it paper, but I'm like, well, sometimes it's cardstock, sometimes it's the actual cardboard, like made out of cardboard. I'm like, but it's not a token. It's too big to be a token. So I have this like existential crisis in my mind every time. I usually just settle on sheet, but it never really feels satisfying.
Well, sticking with translation, Joshua had a question. What are some signs a game will not translate well into another language? Actually, I had two questions. The other one was, what is a game you enjoy teaching more than playing?
Ooh, okay. All right. First question. It's always possible to translate. So it's not a question of whether it's going to be a bad translation or not. It's just how long it will take.
Okay.
Right? Because we talked about those colloquialisms or the fluff-filled rule books that are not so technical. And right, I have to do research. I have to put on my poetry goggles instead of my technical goggles, right? So I have to worry about alliteration or choosing the exact word with the right connotation. So it's almost like I'm writing a novel instead of a rule book. So it just takes longer. For some translators, that means the bill will be higher if they charge by the hour. I charge by the word, so it doesn't really matter how long I take. So yeah, it just depends. You should know, though, if there's any party games full of references, though, that translator had a hell of a job, and they were working for a minute.
How do you know when you're done? When is it simply the deadline's approaching and we have to go, or is there a point you can say, yes, this makes sense, and or do you hand it off to test readers and say, does this make sense? So
again, each translator is different because we're all freelance, right? So we formed our own schedules.
Oh.
Yes. Routines. That's the word I was looking for. We form our own routines. What I do a first pass. I abide by the something is better than perfect. So I do my first pass. And at that point, once I finish the rule book and all the cards, I know how the game functions. And then I go to bed. I'm like, I'm not going to look at this again today. Wake up with fresh eyes, with my full understanding. I do another pass. And at this point, I double check that my glossary is consistent. So I do Control F. I generally highlight words that I'm like, I'm not satisfied with this translation. So I'll go back and revisit those, find a more flowy way of saying whatever phrase. I'm done when I've read it once or twice and made no changes. That's not to say it's perfect at that point, though, because we've all probably learned this lesson in school, where you're trying to edit your own paper, you turn it in, and there's like red circles everywhere, obvious mistakes that you've made, but you don't notice them because it's your own work, right?
Right.
So the publishers I work with all have editors that will do that final pass, and they're native English speakers, so they can catch any Franglish that I missed. So yeah, other translators, though, have their own editor that they work with, so their rates may be higher, but they do like this all-encompassing package.
All in one product, yeah.
The second question, a game I enjoy teaching more than playing. I don't really enjoy teaching, so I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be an answer to that one.
Fair enough.
I love teaching Caverna, but I also love playing Caverna. That's a game I don't need a rule book to teach.
You've got your patter down. You know how to start and how to get the concepts across. How long is your teach on Caverna? How long does it take you?
15 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I don't go over the tiles. I have everyone take a picture of the tiles so they can look at them at their leisure.
Ah.
A picture of the tiles.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Each room has a different effect. So I'm like, no, nobody's got time to go over each tile. Figure it out on your own.
That's okay. It's sort of like having your own player aid, or having the back page of the rule book or the index or whatever. And okay.
Yep. And I scribble them out once they're bought, so I don't look at them anymore. Pro tip.
Wow. I am such a Luddite. I don't think of using technology like this. Like, we need a pad of paper. I'll just scribble this down with my scribe ability. Not thinking to take a picture of it. Anyway, moving on to Jerry's question. Jerry, and this is going to be good for Tom, too, because Tom is a recent tattoo aficionado. Jerry asks, what is your favorite tattoo that you have, and what tattoo do you want next, if you're even thinking about that yet?
Ooh. This is going to be a podcast, too, right?
Yes, so it's not the visual. I have to describe visual.
But for the video right now, my favorite tattoo is my first one. It's a Wonder Woman. I got that when I was 20. And it's expanded into this whole sleeve that I have. That's incorporated a few other pieces I acquired. But that one's meaningful to me, just as my first one. The whole sleeve is a conversation starter because it's got these, I don't know if you can see it, it's double exposure face that tends to trip people out with the double eyes, double mouth.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I do see that.
Okay, yeah.
My next tattoo, eventually, will be a sea otter and a sea turtle, which are my parents' favorite animals.
Oh, that's cool. What about you, Eric?
I have not dipped into the world. I
Eric, everyone
really
else has
don't know
done
if
it.
I'd be able to decide.
You're dice guy. That's what everyone else did.
That's true. I could do that. I just don't know. I'm so indecisive. I wouldn't be able to figure out what to start with.
You could start with one dot, and then it could turn into this whole pointillism
There you go.
Ooh,
piece.
that would take a long
Just a lot of very
time,
short
though.
appointments. Just
right.
one dot at a time. Ow, I'm done.
All right, Danny, we're going to jump to the chat here. Olivia says, do you see yourself happy to stay in marketing within the industry, or do you hope to try out a new hat in the future? You've made waves in this industry, so thank you for sharing today.
This is a question I've asked myself multiple times. But the problem is I grew up in this industry. So it's really, besides teaching, it's all I know. And we're such a weird ragtag group of people that I'm sure there's transferable skills, but I wouldn't have as much fun as, say, as like a corporate marketer, I'm assuming. So no, I've never really meaningfully considered leaving the industry, even though there are other opportunities, right? There's definitely bigger budgets elsewhere. But no, I love our little industry.
I like this question from Nick. What is the one French word or phrase that we Americans constantly say wrong?
Beaucoup, which is one of the basic, basic words. It means a lot. However, Americans tend to pronounce it beaucoup, which means nice ass instead of a lot. And because it's such a common word, it's just constantly mispronounced.
French is my kryptonite. Occasionally, I'll have to read a word or phrase in French for one of my books, and the vowels just don't make sense to me, so I have probably made that mistake at least once.
Okay, I'm looking for some other question to move on here. No one even asked, like, I'm looking down in here and stuff here. So let's see here. People are talking about tattoos and dot tattoos, and someone said, how do you find games that are hard to get? But I don't know how you would know that.
She's got them in her garage. She's been hoarding them.
Well, I guess we'll just let's jump into games, Eric.
Let's talk about some stuff we've been playing. Let's move on to our 1-and-1 discussion. We're going to talk about one game that we had an opportunity to play recently that got us super excited, and one that's on the horizon that we're very excited to try soon. Danny, why don't you go first?
I recently gave into the hype and purchased my own copy of Ark Nova.
Ah, yes.
Yes, that's good hype.
So good. So good. Yeah, it deserves the hype. I love Terraforming Mars, but this one I think has surpassed it for me in terms of the engine building card based game.
How many people do you play it with normally?
I've only played it with two, me and my partner.
Mike just told me it works really well as a solo game.
I believe that too, because it is a long game, so that would probably be good too.
He says like 45 minutes playing it solo. So, all right, let me ask you this. When you buy animals in Ark Nova, do you buy animals based on trying to accomplish goals and such, or does when the giant pandas show up, you can't control yourself and you want to get that just because of the name? This is a serious question, Eric, because I know which one I do.
So I started my first game. I got the Elizabeth Hargrave card, and that was the first card I made. I had no birds in my hand. I didn't see birds until the very last round of the game. So I was stuck building reptile houses. I had so many snakes, but all I wanted was birds. If birds had come out, I would have bought birds because I love these little feathery friends. So Yes, I generally go the panda cute strategy, but it was not in the cards.
You build the zoo you want, not the one that necessarily works with the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to go.
So what are you looking forward to playing?
Excellent.
I am looking forward to finally playing my copy of Perseverance, because I've got it all punched out and organized and ready for like the past month and a half. It's just sitting there waiting for me to read the rulebook. But the punching got me very excited to see the differences between episode 1 and episode 2.
So this is essentially two very different games in the same box.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that, because what if you hate one of them? Or
then you play the other.
Well, sure,
Yeah,
but
you have a
I paid for double stuff then. I mean, because I think some of the components cross over, but not all of them.
Not all of them. The player board is what really fascinated me, because like the episode 1 is the size of a sticky note, but episode 2 is like 3 times as big. I'm like, wow, what happened between episode 1 and episode 2?
I believe David Turtsey got involved between the first and the second. It's about dinosaurs. Eric, have you played any of the Mind Clash games?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Danny, have you?
No.
Yes, I've played Anachrony and Tricerion.
Do you like them?
I've only played both of them one time because they're a beast to learn. I enjoyed it. Yes, I enjoyed them. They're one of those games. They are the kind of game where you have to play a round or two before everything clicks. So
Sure.
I am excited to play them again, having already had this click epiphany. But yeah, they are not for everyone.
You have to play them soon enough, though, while you still remember
Yes.
what you did on the last play. Because I've had that happen on some of these monsters, that you play it and, all right, I know what I need to do next time. And then it's 6 months before you get to play it again. And like, I don't remember the epiphany's gone.
That's my experience with Sulkin. I have to play it back to back 2 times because one is to learn the rules again, the other is to actually play.
Oh, you just gave me a great idea for a new top 10 list, a back-to-back top 10 list. Games you have to play back-to-back because the first time you're just relearning how to play it.
That's a long title. You might need to work on that one.
No, just back-to-back.
Okay.
And then people are like, what does that mean? Like, watch the video.
There you go. Boom. Marketing.
Plans.
All right, Eric, your turn.
All right. So I'm always excited when Sashi and Sashi comes out with something new, and their latest is a game called Before the Guests Arrive. The idea is that you got this family
I put the wrong one here.
that is trying to clean up before guests arrive. There's 2 types of cards. There's just stuff. So there's like board games and books and kids' toys and perfume bottles. And then there are color-coded members of the family that can clean up those things. And these cards are all shuffled together, and they're put into a grid. And then on your turn, you'll take one row or column from that grid. It's sort of an offset grid, like a stair-step pattern. And you'll take one row or column, and you get all those cards, but they're not scoring yet. You have the opportunity once per turn to take one of the characters. If you have a person card, they have either 1 or 2 hands on them, and they have a color. So I think the dad is blue and has 2 hands. He can collect 2 blue groups and put them face down, score them. And you continue on. And then the whole array refills periodically. And you go until the guests arrive, which is one of the cards on the bottom, and you will score points for what you've managed to put away, but you will lose points for anything that you collected and didn't use, weren't able to score. It is a very simple game. It is probably one of the simplest in the Sashi and Sashi line. I think they designed it that way. So as such, I think it might be a little too light for me, but it is charming and it plays very quickly. And it's easy to teach. I actually brought it out with my wife's work friends. They came over for a game day, and my wife's like, don't teach anything that's new to you. I want you to teach games you know. I'm like, no, we're going to play this. And it worked great. We played before the guests arrived, before all the guests arrived.
There you go.
That's
So it's
pretty on the
charming
nose.
but very light. It is
I was
a little on the
I was a
nose.
little taken aback the other day, Eric. I got an email from Sashi saying very
Yeah.
nice things to me, and then realized, because Mike has pointed this out before, but I always forget, that it's the same person. Sashi and Sashi is just Sashi, just twice. It's the same person.
Well, I think it's more than one person that does. It's not the design team. Sashi is the designer, but I think there is a relative or a spouse that does some of the behind the scenes stuff. And that's why it's Sashi and Sashi.
That's not what Eric said. I'm not. You are Eric. Sorry. That's not what Mike said. But Eric sounds so much more correct when he says things. So
That was my understanding.
Where's the French rulebook for us to consult?
It actually
Yes.
it might be in here.
Pretty
It
sure
might
we
be
would
in here.
have to go to the Japanese rule book, which is a whole different pair of translation.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So then on the horizon, I just got the new Jurassic Park Unmatched set, which I did not realize how large the T-Rex is in this thing.
Whoa.
This is a gigantic miniature. It's very solid. I'm very excited to try out the T-Rex versus Dr. Sattler and Ian Malcolm, and chase my children around with a dinosaur.
Well,
actually, they might shoot the dinosaur.
Actually, you should let the kids play the dinosaur.
But Tom, I want to play the dinosaur.
Yeah, I don't care. And I'll tell you why, because I've played this set. It is very difficult unless you completely change your strategy to beat the T-Rex. It has a ton of hit points. It draws a new card every round. You have to play the long game. You have to survive, stay away from the T-Rex, because the T-Rex can bite 2 spaces away. It's...
Oh.
I got just massacred by that T-Rex.
Okay, thank you for the tip. I still want to play the T-Rex.
Well, maybe you should buy 2 sets then, and then you can
do
both be a
T-Rex versus
T-Rex.
We could.
All right. So a game I just played over the weekend with my kids is called First Rat. So in First Rat, this is a game coming from Pegasus. You are wanting to be the first rat into space, like first man on the moon. And you actually, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You want to be the first ratronaut into space. So you are collecting baking powder and lemon juice, because, you know, if you mix them, that's a good way to launch it. You need cans of peas and calculators so you can take this up into space. This is a really fun, entertaining game. On your turn, you move your rat down a track. You can never move it backwards, so it's that ratcheting mechanism, and you're just getting these different resources that you need. But you have multiple rats that you're moving down the track. You can get special abilities so that when you land on a spot, you get more things than normal. And there's a lot more going on, but man, is it fun and simple and easy, and the theme is great. Although we did have a long discussion about, did the rats ever make it to the moon? Because maybe they're just building this little dumb spaceship. It launches, all the rats cheer. First ratronaut in space. It goes on the other side of the fence where a bunch of cats are waiting. They're like, they eat the rats. And we don't know that.
I have a question, actually. Do we know why the ratronauts are trying to go to the moon?
It's probably in the thing. I think it's because, I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure it's probably because they think the moon is made of cheese.
That's perfect.
That's probably right. That's where the monkeys are, though.
That's the gold mine, Eric. That's a very deep cut. Monkeys
That's
on
my
the moon.
style right there.
Wow. All right.
Yep.
Okay, so the game I'm looking forward to playing, and I know Eric would want to play this one too, is Lords of the Chords. Now, Eric, have you seen the cover for this game?
If this is the game I'm thinking about, this came out at Essen several years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
They might have been showing it there, but it was a
classical.
Kickstarter. It just came out.
Okay. Yep,
So-
that's the one. Yeah.
So,
All those classical composers.
yeah, so things like I'll Be Back are in this. And one of the boxes I got with this that holds all the cards is a little K-shaped like a keyboard.
Yep.
And man, I want to play this so much because you know what? for all the joking and puns, and man, these guys just look hilarious on the cover. All that aside, the people who made it seem to know their classical music, to know their stuff, but also into games. This game just has to be decent, and I'm on board. Okay, I'm not even expecting, if it's a great game, fine, but I don't think there's enough music-themed games. I really don't. You know, music our world is made of music. How many of us go throughout a day and don't listen to music at all? I listen to music on the way to work. I listen to music when I'm in my room. If I'm watching a TV show, music is involved. And yet, it's in so few games. It bothers me. Music's a great theme.
And a lot of music games have not done very well. There was a couple of composing games that I really was not impressed with over the years. So having a good music-themed game is also something we need.
Unless it's rap. Rap is trash.
Wow.
I'm kidding, folks. Actually, I don't like rap music, but I'm sure if you like it, you'll like it. Polka, on the other hand, amazing. I'm kidding.
Wow.
Dixie music's where it's at.
Wow.
You don't like Dixie, Eric?
Oh, no, Dixie's great.
Okay. Danny, what's your favorite kind of music? If it's rap, I apologize.
I like all sorts. I can name my favorite band, which probably will tell you more about my taste in music. They're called, don't react to it, I'll explain, but they're called Murder by Death. It is based on the old black and white comedy film.
Yeah.
And their musical style is dark Americana. So think Johnny Cash, but with some like Edgar Allan Poe lyrics.
Dark Americana.
Is a very specific genre.
I have a tattoo. Actually, I have 2 tattoos of them. They are my favorite band.
Okay.
And that is how you bring the episode full circle. Eric's favorite group is either Weird Al Yankovic or Rockapella.
I am wearing my official Weird Al shirt that I got at the concert this week. So, yes.
Did you go to a concert? Because I didn't notice from your posts.
Yes, I did. That was sarcasm, wasn't it?
That was very much sarcasm.
Yes, indeed.
Alrighty. Well, those are games. We're looking forward to all this stuff.
So, Danny, if folks want to find out what you have been up to lately, where's the best place to find out more about you?
I am fairly active on Twitter at Danni Below. Below is in not above, but below. Or I'm all of the Hachette social media people if you want to talk to me there.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for...
I'm really looking forward to seeing what Hachette comes out with this year. I'm very excited about the growth of that company. So we're very... When I heard you were joining them, I was very excited to see what's going to happen.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of cool stuff at Gen Con. So I'll see you there.
Exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Danny. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a blast.
And that, I guess, folks, is that so. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer.
And we'll see you soon at the table.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again in 2 weeks when our guest will be Shelf Stories host Jason Perez. At the Table is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Roy Kennedy, Wendy Yee, and Chris Yee. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. Medieval French footwear provided by Kalis Shoe Source. And support for everything at the Dice Tower comes from viewers and listeners like you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter, or to Dom at Dicetower.com or Eric at Dicetower.com. Until we see you again from all of us at the table, have fun gaming.